On today's episode of the Good Take Podcast, we have an amazing, amazing show.
Yeah, we got two guests. First up, Jason McIntyre of Fox Sports joins us to talk about sports in the COVID world, a little bit of MLB, a little NBA, a little NFL, some sports betting, wide range of topics, really fun.
And we're also joined by the Islanders radio play-by-play man, Chris King. He's going to talk to us about how he's preparing to call NHL playoff games remotely on a monitor.
And also, we have a few really cool guests that should be coming up pretty soon after these guys, so stay tuned for those. Now let's start the show. What's going on, everybody? Welcome into episode 7 of the Good Take Podcast. Today we are very excited to be joined by Jason McIntyre from Fox Sports. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for inviting me, guys.
Yeah, we were really excited to have you on because, with this podcast, we're kind of starting a sort of a sports media project just from the ground up, just as a hobby for fun, and hoping to maybe turn it into something bigger, which is obviously something you have experience in with the Big Lead, which is a place we're both fans of. What inspired you to start that in the first place?
I think I was a little disillusioned by the business. I was in newspapers. And I would go into the office and it was the daily grind. Hey, did you see the hockey game last night? What do you think about the baseball game? And I'm like, come on, guys. I can't watch sports all the time. I can't watch every hockey game. I got to have a life. And I kind of got burnt out of sports. I started covering some stuff in high school as a, failed high school athlete. I was good at sports when I was really young. And then I kind of didn't get bigger and everybody got bigger, so I couldn't make the high school team. So my parents said, go join the local newspaper and be an intern or whatever. So I was, low-level guy, started, worked my way up and loved it. So fast forward to out of college, I'm at like year 3 on the job. And I was like, listen, this is boring. I'm not making any money. I got to cover high school football Saturday mornings, after partying Friday night in New York City. And I met what would be now my wife. And I was like, I can't continue to do this. So all that added up and I bailed on newspapers for magazines. But then I had that itch to, I still love sports, but working at Us Weekly, it's more celebrities. I would go to the Super Bowl and cover the fun parties. But I didn't, have an outlet to talk about, Kobe and going to the finals with Shaq and the Lakers breaking up and the Knicks stinking and all that fun stuff. So I started the website in about 2006, just like you guys. You starting as a hobby, you don't know where it's going to take you. And it kind of took off because, like you guys, I focused on sports media in addition to, opinions about Tom Brady and the Cowboys and the Jets and all that fun stuff. And I got kind of lucky with it, sold the website, fast forward 10 years, and here I am in Los Angeles.
Do you have anything sort of from that venture that you're most proud of?
Ooh, hit me with the hard questions early. I guess, we built up a really strong staff, and it's tough to run a website and try to recruit guys when you're not meeting them. I mean, there were some guys on work that I had never met before. Some I still have never met. And you just had to kind of go with your gut, trust what they had written at other places. And we gave a lot of young guys shots, and they've now gone on to ESPN. Some guys are now at Clay Travis's website. There's a guy you might know, Worldwide Wob. He was like an intern for us one summer. He was at ESPN for a minute. Yeah, it was good to build a staff and nurture it and see these guys go on to bigger things. So I guess that's what I'm pretty proud of.
Nice. Now, you obviously mentioned like Us Weekly and ESPN, the magazine, and others. I mean, you sort of worked the gamut. How did you sort of go about just finding like your writing voice? Like, obviously, like we're like in the beginning stages of our life and career. Like, how did you find your voice? Like, are you still sort of finding it? And how, I'm sure you're always finding it. How long did it take you to sort of, stop sort of faking it until you're making it? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Still finding it, that's for sure. But I grew up in Northern Virginia, and it was, again, this is like feels like the Paleozoic era where you would get the newspaper off your driveway My dad would go to work early, pick up the newspaper. I would instantly go for sports. And the two guys I read the most were Mike Wilbon and Tony Kornheiser in the Washington Post. And I just loved the Kornheiser voice. He was also a styled section columnist, just riffing on stuff. I just loved those guys. Now, this is like late 80s, early 90s. And I read those two, and they had a huge impact on me. Obviously, the Post had a lot of good writers back in the day. David Aldridge was there, J.A. Adonde, so many good, talented writers at the Post. And I guess that's where I first got it, started to find my voice. But the one thing I didn't do that might seem weird is that I never read guys. I didn't want to read other people my age I didn't want to have any impact of their voice on mine. I liked having older, the wiser, they're now 60, 70 years old. That's kind of who impacted me as opposed to good guys my age and writers that are in the same age bracket I am.
So now, you're on TV, you're on Fox Sports, and now you obviously do a lot of betting stuff with Lock It In. What I'm curious about is what's your strategy sort of in the COVID era and sports without fans? Do your betting strategies change at all with that in mind?
When you came out of that lockout, unders cashed at like a ridiculous rate. I think it was 60% for the first maybe 200 plus games. And if you were betting unders, then you cleaned up. Now Vegas obviously adjusted, and that's what happens in gambling with the markets. But initially there was an opportunity, and I think there is one here. Now they have adjusted significantly, so we'll see. But I don't even anticipate 115 to 105. I don't think it's going to be anything like that. Again, so many players out. Like you said, no fans, no home court. These are unfamiliar gyms for these guys. And again, they're coming up off a 4-month layoff. A lot of these guys are playing like 20, 25 minutes in the scrimmage. And you're going to, groupings and units on the floor that have never played together all season. You're going to see that for the Clippers right out of the gate. And, they've got a couple new guys. The Lakers have J.R. Smith, Dion Waiters. So I think unders are the way to go. And, of course, I'm sure, you know how gambling works. If I'm wrong, all the people are going to hit me up. Now, if I'm right, nobody's going to say anything because, that's the internet for you.
Yeah. I call it the offensive line syndrome. That people only get on your case if you mess it up.
Yeah, basically. Yeah.
No one ever, when you do it well, no one ever pats on the back. I do want to ask our most pressing betting question, which we were debating last night. Do you think Sam Darnold is a good value pick to win MVP this coming season?
Oh, come on. I would look at the options that he has. He's throwing to who's he throwing to? He's got that rookie out of Baylor, I think Mims. Robbie Anderson's gone. Crowder is in the slot. The new guy they picked up, Perryman. Like, I can't imagine that he would be an MVP value pick. Now, they certainly have something cooking here with adding 2 first-round picks. Remember, the Cowboys would not get anywhere near that. And Jerry Jones is used to basically willing to make any trade, even bad ones. And the fact that he wouldn't give up 2 number 1 picks, Seattle did. I think that's a big win for the Jets. Adams is significant. He's a transformative safety, but when has a safety ever swung the balance of power in the league? On defense, it's edge rushers and cornerbacks. I mean, I like Jamal Adams. I don't like that after 2 good years, he's basically asking for a new contract. Like, the only guys who have done that, Khalil Mack and Aaron Donald, both of them were defensive players of the year. Jamal Adams just wasn't that. So, listen, if you're a headache, get out of town. And the Jets did a good job getting rid of him and getting a great value.
I was shocked. I mean, I know Pete Carroll is aggressive, but even by his standards, that was I couldn't believe it. But we did want to ask you. I mean, I guess we're talking about over-unders. I mean, is the baseball season going to last over-under like a week? And do you see it being usable, especially the Marlins? Even more players as of this morning tested positive than we thought. I mean, I love that you're playing the short season. Like, how do you think that's going to shake out?
Interesting. Now, I haven't been on social media here in 45 minutes, which might sound laughable, but stuff's happening so quickly. So, are the Marlins playing their game tonight, or what's the latest?
So I think it's still undecided, but they have more players tested positive than had that, and then they had thought yesterday when they did cancel their game. So I think they're still figuring it out as of right now.
Look at the NBA; they're in the bubble, and now they've gotten things under control. Both obviously in a bubble. Then you look at the Premier League and how well they're handling it. But the key to all this is it's a disaster. I hope they finish the season. I greatly enjoy watching baseball now that there's something on TV. I'm sure you've seen. I'm hopeful, but I think Rob Manfred's been pretty terrible so far, leading baseball the last 4 or 5 months.
Nice. Now, who would you take in the NBA? The LA teams or the field? To win the title, an LA team winning or the field?
Oh, I haven't seen the odds, but I would take the LA teams because there's only 3 or 4 teams that can win the title. The Bucks can probably win the title, although they've never been to the finals before. We know Kawhi can. We know LeBron can. Who else in the bubble can? Maybe the 76ers. They've never been to a conference finals with Simmons and Embiid. They have a new point guard. Ben Simmons has a new position. Celtics are pretty good, but the Kemba Walker knee injury is very troubling. The guy had 4 months off, and he comes back and he's missing practices. Just super disappointing because I thought the Celtics could make the finals. But yeah, I would say 5 teams could win it, and since 2 are in LA, I will take the LA teams.
Now, we did want to ask you about something. Last episode, we had your Fox Sports colleague Rob Parker on, and
yeah,
we he's a big not big on Steph, kind of a detractor a little bit, and we're going to do a little bit of debate about him with that. And you're higher on Steph than a lot of other people in sports media, so we had to ask you about him. First off, have you and Rob ever argued about Steph, sort of away from the cameras and away from the microphones, just like when you're just hanging out? Or
into him.
Well, I mean, first of all, no, we haven't, but we've argued about him plenty on air, whether it was Dan Patrick's show, his radio show, TV, whatever. But he's definitely wrong on Steph Curry. Now, I should add that I've been an early Curry guy dating back to his days at Davidson. I was crestfallen when the Knicks did not get Curry.
He was the first guest on the podcast, right?
There you go. Wow, you've done your research. Yeah, so I had started a podcast at the Big Lead way back. I mean, I'd have to look it up, maybe 2010 or 11. But before Curry signed that no, not the massive deal, but the $79 million deal, which is massive, but for NBA standards, it's not. So it was right before that, and he had not popped. I don't think they'd gotten out of the first round, but I was still a big Curry guy, and one of his former colleagues or friends from the Davidson area I knew through social media. So he set it up. So Curry was the first guest I had on my podcast way back. And then when he had hand surgery recently, he was out here in LA near where I live. And my son plays, youth basketball. And I'm at the draft and some dads start texting me, hey, Steph Curry's at our gym right now. I was like, wow, that's wild. So I happened to go to the gym the next morning to play pickup. I walk out of the court and Steph Curry's there working out after his hand surgery. And I just started talking to him. I posted a picture with it on Instagram. And I am a Curry fan. I just want to get that on the table. I love everything about the guy. He doesn't get in trouble. Good family man. He's religious. And he's a historically great shooter and player. I don't think there's any debate at all that he's the second best point guard ever after Magic Johnson. I don't know if he can catch Magic 5 titles, but what Curry's done in the middle of the LeBron James run, winning 2 MVP awards, one of them unanimous, which has never been done before, not by Jordan, not by Magic, nobody. I think that's historic. I mean, he's basically been a generational change agent in the NBA. Nobody was shooting 30-foot threes regularly a decade ago or 2 decades ago, ever. And he starts that now. Damian Lillard is shooting them, and a bunch of guys are making them. LeBron's doing it. I mean, you can't write the story of the history of the NBA without Steph Curry pretty high up in that. So I don't think there's any debate in terms of his place in history and as a player. Rob Parker's way off, citing one stat. Oh, he hasn't hit a clutch shot in the playoffs. Are you kidding me? It's because they destroy people, and he sits out a lot of fourth quarters. Yeah. It's just – I mean, I like Rob, but that's crazy.
No, me too. I mean, and Steph said a lot of clutch shots. Rob, he just picked, she cherry picked one stat in one specific situation. Listen, the man won't even give Tom Brady love, which like I can't stand him, but like, I mean, if you don't think that he's, I mean, he's pretty like undisputably the GOAT. We did want to sort of wrap up on this. I see you tweeting a lot about sort of how the sports media and the political media kind of are like mimicking each other. Obviously, like there was like last week, I forget the guy's name from Barstool kind of got used to interview Trump, and now everyone's, I don't know, there seems just to be a lot of just sort of team playing. So I am curious. So, like, do you think the sports media has sort of begun acting like their political counterparts, and they're also sort of talking about politics as like more as well? And it seems like the industry is kind of getting a little bit toxic in similar ways. It's borrowing some of the toxicity that the political media has. Do you think it's like that's sort of salvageable? Like, do you think we're even heading in that direction? And how do we sort of like, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, that's a great question that would take a long time to answer. Yeah. I think my short answer would be I'm going to blame it on coronavirus. And when sports comes back, I don't think that, you're going to see all this stuff on social media about sports media getting into politics. Right now, the election is coming up in November, 100 days or whatever it is. Obviously, that's going to be a huge talking point. But once we have NBA playoffs and we have football and maybe college football and there's going to be hockey, like there's going to be so much happening. Golf majors are going to be happening this fall. I just don't think that what you've seen for the last 4 or 5 months is going to continue. At least I hope that. I personally don't think sports fans care that much. Obviously, listen, coronavirus is a black swan event, 150,000 people dead. Everybody's wearing masks everywhere. Like, it's just, this is unheard of. So I think that's a natural talking point, but I don't think the politicization, I don't think I said that right, but you know the word I'm trying to say, politicization of sports media, I don't think that's going to continue, and I sure hope it doesn't.
All right, one last thing we wanted to ask you. What sort of work or projects do you have going on right now that you want to talk about?
What are you guys reading my emails? I do have a very big project coming out pretty soon. Very exciting. I just got an email about the press release this week. And that should be going out here in the next few days, maybe early next week. But it's a project, listen, I've done web, I've done doing TV, doing radio. There's one area I haven't totally gone into on a daily basis, and that'll be coming up. But also, listen, we're doing some really cool gambling stuff at Fox. As I told you earlier, we're kind of building that platform out. So if you guys are gambling fans, shoot me your resume and some clips. We're gonna be doing some fun things at Fox. And other than that, like, gosh, we need sports back badly. Yeah. So I can't wait for that.
Where should I DM it to you, or where the website I can like send you?
Oh yeah, no, just you can just email me at the same email, Jason Raj McIntyre at Yahoo.
All right, Jason. Thanks so much for stopping by. Really appreciate it. Take care.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Right. All right. Be sure to check out Good Take with Alex Hutton and Zevan Schuster on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever else podcasts are available.
And be sure to follow us on Twitter at AlexHutton35. That's Alex Hutton, HUTTON 35, and at ZShust9. That's ZSHUST9. And please follow us, spread our work, and we hope to see you back here again soon. Thanks so much.
Now back to the show.
Welcome back to the Good Take podcast. Today we are joined by the play-by-play man for the Islanders on WRHU, Chris King. Chris, thanks so much for joining us. How are you doing in quarantine?
I'm doing good, guys. It's good to see some things start to open up a little bit, especially here in New York, which, had a really rough start with everything, but now is, one of the best states as far as the fewest cases of COVID-19. So it is kind of nice to see a little, somewhat of a return toward normalcy in this area for sure.
Yeah, and it's big stuff kind of in your field because the NHL is starting back up again. There's some scrimmages today. The playoffs are almost underway. And as a broadcaster for you, how is calling the games, in this environment going to be different from calling the games in the arena? Like, what are you doing sort of in particular to prepare for that?
Yeah, it's going to be very different, Alex. Like the actual game prep itself is the same as far as, coming up to speed on the Islanders. That's the easy part for me. And then doing the same for, the Rangers tomorrow for the exhibition game. And then obviously Florida on the weekend for the playoff game. So that side of it remains the same. But, calling a game off a monitor is something I've never done before. So I've been doing this a long time, but never had to call play-by-play off a monitor, especially a game like hockey that moves so fast. So today I was almost practicing, if you will, when the Flyers and Penguins started their game at 4 o'clock, just kind of seeing the different feeds that they're going to provide for us. And, have to look at one screen to kind of follow the action, another screen to pick up the clock and the score and the penalty time and everything. So my head, I think, is going to have to be a little bit on a swivel to pick it all up. So, obviously we'd all like to be there in person, especially when it's playoff games that are the most exciting games of the year. We wish fans were there. They live for those playoff games as well. But it is interesting in that, I've done this for so long, but yet here's something I've never done before. So it does present, an interesting challenge to try to, number one, do the broadcast, and then number two, bring the same energy that I would have. I was inside Nassau Coliseum surrounded by 16,000 rabid Islander fans. So it will be a challenge for sure.
Yeah, I was going to say, and that energy is quite immense. So I'm sure I'm quite used to hearing it. I was going to ask, like, what do you think of the NHL's return plan? Alex and I were sort of comparing it to like the NBA. We sort of thought maybe the NHL could have had some conclusion to like the regular season. Like, what do you think of like its plan and how it sort of compares to like other sports?
Yeah, I like what they did in, basically saying, hey, look, every team that was at NHL 500 or better is in. So the only teams that aren't in are the teams that had a losing record, essentially. So I like the fact that they're jumping straight to the playoffs. I know the NBA is playing a handful of games to close out the season to make it official, but, the NHL went with points percentage. So it really is, 85% of the season was done. So if you go by points percentage, you can kind of say, okay, look, we're letting everybody in that would have been in, and we're giving the teams that were at least NHL 500 or better, a chance to have a playoff round as well. So I like that aspect of it, and I really like the bubble aspect. I mean, you talk about the NBA obviously doing their bubble thing. Blew up on them a little bit because they're down in Florida, but the NHL is strictly in Canada now, with the two cities being Toronto and Edmonton, where the COVID-19 rate is way down, obviously, from what it is in the United States right now. And then, we've all seen what's happened with baseball the last couple of days, not having any bubble at all. And we know what's happened to the Florida Marlins and all the games that have been canceled. So the NHL just wrapped up phase 3, which was the training camp mode. And in the last 8 days, they didn't have a single positive case in over 4,000 tests that were conducted. So, they had to get everybody to the bubble. They've done that now. And, hopefully they won't have any positives that come out of everybody now quarantining in this bubble, if you will, in the two cities.
Yeah, so it's interesting, like, obviously like the virus is being talked about a ton, as it should. But I think the one thing that sort of has maybe flown under the radar is just, the fact that all these guys are going to be, resting for months and months leading into the playoffs. Usually by the time you get to the postseason, like, you're worn down and it's a battle of attrition. I mean, hockey is, more than any other sport, it's, who can just, stay upright the longest. And now, you always see, like, I always hear hockey people say that, you're very incentivized to win your first round series, like, as fast as possible, sort of to move on. And you don't want to play any more games than you have to. Do you think that sort of applies this year at all? Like, or is this playoffs just totally like different in that aspect?
Yeah, there's two sides of that coin. I agree with you the first part of it, Zevan, because, look, 82-game season is a grind. Islanders especially were extremely banged up when the pause was pushed by the NHL on March 12th. They didn't have Casey Cizikas. They didn't have Johnny Boychuk. They had no chance of Adam Pelech coming back for the playoffs at all. And now 4.5 months later, all three of those players will be back. The only flip side to what you discussed about winning that series quickly, if you go back to what happened to the Islanders a year ago, they swept the Penguins in the opening round and then had about 10 days off before the Carolina Hurricanes arrived, and they got swept by the Hurricanes. So sometimes coaches will say, hey, if we have a knockdown, drag-out 7-game series, although you're going to be tired when the next series starts, you're going to prove to yourself that, hey, we played an incredible opponent. We took our game to a different level, and sometimes that momentum can carry you over. So it definitely can work both ways. Let's remember now, too, that, the initial series this year is best 3 out of 5. So teams do want to get to their game as quickly as possible, because one loss can be the difference of, advancing or not. And Barry Trotz made a great point of saying in the year he won the Stanley Cup with the Washington Capitals, they were down 3-2 after 5 games. So if that was the best of 5, he wouldn't have won the Stanley Cup. They rallied to win Game 6 and 7 to raise that cup. So both sides know you got to get to your game quickly when it's best of 5.
Yeah, shorter series, got to be kind of right on top of things. All right, so when you said you'd be willing to come on, we started sort of setting up the details of this podcast. I reached out to a couple of my friends from college who are huge hockey fans and told them about this, to sort of ask them what questions they'd like to have asked. So this next one comes from a friend of mine. So if you like it, give her credit. If you don't like it, blame her. What she wanted to know is, what's been the most rewarding moment you've had with the Islanders?
That's a really good question. I would say rewarding moment for me, the biggest thing is for the last 10 years now, we've had this relationship with Hofstra University, and Zevan can tell you all about that. And, it's just been unbelievable for me to see these students come through our program who at the beginning, had maybe no experience at all broadcasting hockey games. And then by the time they leave, they've done 4 years of NHL hockey, which they can put on their resume. But they've done such an incredible job that outsiders who listen in don't even realize they're college students because they're so polished in their craft. So I think that's the single most rewarding thing for me, is getting to work with so many students and seeing them grow and them become better broadcasters. And especially in the early years when Hofstra first began partnering with the Islanders on these broadcasts, I actually had my color analyst as some of the Hofstra students, so we really put them to work. But these days, they're still doing a ton of on-air work as far as intermission features and, between period interviews, post-game interviews, great stuff on air. But behind the scenes, most nights it's 5, 6, 7 students who are in the WRHU studios making it all sound so smooth, pushing the buttons and doing, all the incredible work behind the scenes. So I think the biggest thing for me, Alex, and you can tell your friend, is, just the reward you get to see young students start out completely green in this field. And then by the time they leave 4 years later, they're ready to get a similar job in the real world, which many of them have because of the experience they had, with the New York Islanders and, the fact that I got to help them just a little bit on their journey.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And that actually leads perfectly into my next question from you working with, college students and up-and-comers. What sort of advice would you give to people who are trying to break into the broadcasting play-by-play industry?
Yeah, my thing is, get that hands-on experience. I was lucky enough to go to Geneseo in upstate New York, where they had 2 radio stations and a TV station. And what I learned in the classroom was very important to get that degree. I got the bachelor's of communications, but the hands-on that I got at those 2 radio stations and the television station, those are the skills I still use to this day on a daily basis. So get out there, get that experience. I was lucky enough to do over 100 NCAA hockey games in my 4 years at Geneseo. I also got to DJ. I got to do the news. I got to be on television. So all that stuff is just so valuable. So that's what I, always stress to the Hofstra students. Get as much experience as you possibly can. Even if it's in sports that you don't think you might not get in, just kind of getting those reps of doing play-by-play in one sport can translate to another. And just being on air, no matter what you're doing, if you're getting on air, that's going to help you in any other position that you might want, and even behind the scenes positions too. Get that engineering experience, get that producing experience, be as well-rounded as you can. And that's kind of the path that I took up to the play-by-play job, was doing every other job, pre-game, post-game intermission host, then on to producing and engineering the broadcast, then on to color analyst, and finally on to play-by-play. So, take any job that you can to try to get your foot in the door, and then just try to work your way up. But the hands-on is so important. You learn a lot in the classroom, but the real world is where you pick up the skills that you'll use for a lifetime, much like I did.
It's now, are there any broadcasters that you sort of have modeled yourself after, that, you've looked up to, maybe, Doc Emmerich or someone of the sort?
Yeah, Doc, I absolutely love. As a young person, Marv Albert was my guy. Marv Albert in New York, who was absolutely the king at the time. He was the Knicks and Rangers voice, but he was also on the local television station doing sports every night. And it's funny, I actually talked to his son Kenny today, who's I respect him so much too, because he does all 4 major sports and does them all equally well. You'd never know what his primary sport is because he's so good at it. But yeah, Doc Emmerich's the absolute master. It's a thrill to be able to call him a friend and, just watch him and see how he hones his craft and his vocabulary and the words he comes up with that nobody else can. He's certainly one. And again, from the Islander side of things, for me, I had a great mentor in Jiggs McDonald, the longtime television voice of the New York Islanders, who's in the Hockey Hall of Fame for his broadcasting skills. So those would be the guys that, I'd point to right off the bat as really helping me, learn to be a great broadcaster and getting to learn alongside them. In the case of Jiggs and Barry Landers, who had 17 years on Islanders radio, I got to do the broadcast alongside him too. So I'd have to put Barry in that mix as well.
Mm-hmm. All right, now this next question also comes from a friend of mine in that same group. What he wanted to know is, who's the most dynamic player you've ever seen who you feel like didn't get the recognition or the credit they deserved?
That's a tough one, because when you you talk about those dynamic players, obviously Wayne Gretzky and Mario Lemieux, and they did get that recognition. I'll still go with my guy again. My guy growing up was Brian Trottier. Yes, he's in the Hall of Fame, so he got recognition, but I still don't think he ever was recognized as fully as he could have been. In my mind, he was the greatest two-way center to ever play the game, and everybody looks at his numbers and the fact that he played with a guy like Mike Bossy and certainly helped his assist total, feeding a player like that. But defensively, he was so good. He was so strong. He was impossible to knock off his skates. He was physical. He just, to me, still might be the best all-around two-way center to ever play the game in the National Hockey League. So in that regard, I'll have to go with my guy, Brian Trottier. That was my idol growing up as a kid. I always wore number 19 for him. And I still think, most people don't realize how great a complete player he was. They see his numbers and they see him in the Hall of Fame and they think it was all offense, but there was just so much more to Brian's game.
Nice. Now, how would you assess the Islanders' chances going into this bubble playoffs? What would you say they need to do to advance? How would you assess it?
Yeah, it's a good question, Zevan. To me, I look at the series right off the top as the Florida Panthers like to score goals and play high-octane offense hockey. The Islanders are just the opposite. They like to clamp down on defense and play a low-scoring brand. So it'll be very interesting to see how it plays out, especially because of the fact we have two future coaches who are going right into the Hall of Fame. In fact, they've got the most wins of any two active coaches in the NHL right now, and they're top 5 all time. And Barry Trotz for the New York Islanders and Joel Quenneville for the Florida Panthers. So the Islanders are going to try to clamp it down. The Panthers are going to try to ramp it up. So which wins? Usually in the playoffs, it's defensive hockey that wins. And so goaltending is going to be huge. The Panthers have a terrific goaltender in Sergei Bobrovsky. Barry Trotz is choosing between his two goaltenders. But I'm most interested to see how the coaches kind of work this little chess match between them, because they're both so smart. You give them 2 days to prepare and they can break down a team. Well, they've had 2 months to prepare, knowing who their opponent would be. So, home ice belongs to the Islanders. They'll get that last change in 3 out of the potential 5 games. How will Barry Trotz match up against the high-flying offense of the Florida Panthers? And then how will Joel Quenneville try to get his guys to score on an Islander defense that, 2 years ago, first year under Barry, let up the fewest goals against in the National Hockey League. So that's kind of how I look at the series from a broad, high level is, the high-octane offense of the Panthers versus the Loctite clamp-down defense of the Islanders.
I do want to ask really quick then, because you mentioned the goaltenders, and obviously I think the Islanders were in the top 5 in penalty kill, like you mentioned, defensively also. Who do you think Trotz might lean towards for the opening for Game 1? And
I the same thing, yeah.
Yeah, because it's also I also noticed too that especially in hockey, coaches are so loyal. They love to stick with their guy. So do you think whoever starts is going to I guess if they allow in 5 goals, but do you think whoever starts in game, because there's no mixing and matching in a short series, who do you think he might stick with for the series? Do you think?
Yeah, if you think back to the way he started the year, he actually alternated his starting goalies the first 33 straight games between Thomas Greiss and Semyon Varlamov. He told us today, just about an hour ago, I was on the press conference with him, that he is going to split his goalies in that exhibition game against the Rangers just to give them both a look. I think in the end, Semyon Varlamov is going to get the nod just because he had a little bit of a better season than Thomas Greiss did numbers-wise. And, he was kind of brought here to be the number 1 goaltender. But don't, discount the fact that these teams met 4 years ago. The Islanders beat the Panthers in the 2016 playoffs in 6 games. And Thomas Greiss and John Tavares were the 2 reasons why. But Thomas Greiss was absolutely spectacular in that series. And both of these Islander goaltenders have excellent numbers against the Florida Panthers. I do think Varlamov has a lot of incentive just to get back to playoff form. Last year, he kind of got bypassed with the Colorado Avalanche when the playoffs arrived. They didn't play him at all. Philip Grubauer took over the number 1 spot and played every game. So Varley hasn't played in the playoffs in 6 years. He'll be eager to go. Thomas Greiss is the most laid-back guy you'll ever meet, and, he'll be ready to go if called on. And, Zevan, a key point is the 5-game series. As you said, if one of those goalies gives up 5 goals against in Game 1, guess what? They're not going to play Game 2. You can't do it in a best of 5. You're almost on the brink of elimination if you lose a single game. So I don't think we'd see Barry hesitate that if his Game 1 starter struggled, we'd see the other guy in Game 2.
Now, while we're on the topic of goalies, there is something I want to talk about. One of my favorite stories in the NHL last year was Robin Lehner and the sort of his whole arc and his sort of comeback and the way he was able to overcome so much. What was it like for you being sort of like being all up front, having a front row seat to that story?
It was incredible. It was absolutely incredible, Alex. No doubt about it. I mean, it goes back to the day before his first game as a New York Islander where he came out and he, put it all out there. He said, look, this is what I'm dealing with. I'm dealing with this bipolar situation. I'm dealing with addiction. I was addicted to alcohol. I was addicted to drugs, all these things, and, trying to turn his life around and putting it out there in the open for everybody. And it's not an easy thing to do, especially when you go into visiting arenas and your story is known. Fans are going to, some fans are going to applaud you for doing that, but there's some fans who are going to be on you. And he knew what he was facing the entire year. So certainly to go out there and to win that Masterton Award as, the player who best exemplified perseverance, dedication to the game of hockey, and then to be a finalist for the Vezina Trophy, as one of the 3 best goaltenders in the National Hockey League a year ago. Just a spectacular season for Robin Lehner. And, I wish him all the best as well in his future. But it was great to just be around him for that first year, to really see him, not just turn his game around, but turn his life around. And he's been able to stay on that track ever since. So just an amazing story. He will be a fan favorite, for Islander fans forever. He never did get a chance to come back with the way the season played out. That was something that was going to happen, originally on the schedule, but he never did get to come back. So hopefully he'll have that game next year at the Coliseum where the Islander fans can really salute him. But he's talked about, since he's moved on, how big the Islander fans were to him and the way he was treated in the Islander organization being a big part of helping turn his life around.
So speaking of the Nassau Coliseum, do you think, obviously they're trying to build a new arena for 2021 and 2022. Like, I know we're both Warriors fans, and they just moved an arena, and we're kind of worried that they're not going to be able to replicate the same atmosphere. Are you?
And there's a whole thing with the Barclays Center too. So
I know that's been a big issue with the Barclays. Do you think that'll be an issue going forward? Skipping ahead a little bit.
Well, again, right now the Coliseum has been shuttered, and they are working on a plan to reopen it. So I know the Islanders don't want to go back to Barclays Center. That never really was a proper fit. And the local authorities, Laura Curran, who's the Nassau County executive, has already had the parties to the table who are kind of in this dispute over who's going to run the Coliseum. There's certain money that needs to be paid. The lease is overdue right now. So she seems confident that she's going to find a way to fix that. And again, it is just one more season the Islanders have to get through, and everybody, wants that to be at the Nassau Veterans Memorial Coliseum. The good news is their brand new arena at Belmont Park, which got a name last week, it's UBS Arena, is on track, right on schedule to open for the start of the 21-22 season. And again, the NHL has always said that this coming, the following season after this year's playoffs probably wouldn't start till December. So maybe the following year when the Islanders are going to open that new building, maybe it starts in November, buying them an extra month or so. But all plans right now are on schedule, and that building is absolutely gorgeous. And, you guys bring up a good point. You don't want it to lose what makes the Coliseum great, the ambience, and again, the way the crowd is directly on top of the fans. The lower bowl is so tight. And there were a lot of press conferences last week talking about the building when they announced the naming rights. And John Ledecky, the co-owner of the team, said, he visited every single NHL arena, every single NBA arena to kind of take the best of all the arenas in North America, put it in his, and especially that lower bowl. It's going to actually have the biggest lower bowl of any arena in North America to try to keep the fans as close to the action as possible. So it'll be fun to, have a brand new home, but the Islanders certainly hope they get one more go around the final season at the Coliseum before moving to Belmont Park.
Speaking of, if I can just jump in here for really quick, speaking of traveling to every NHL arena, do you have a favorite road environment that you visited?
I think my favorite building is Toronto. I really like the building in Toronto, which is where, the Islanders are going to play in the playoffs. So that'll be fun. But what they did in Toronto was neat. They kind of, when they opened that new building, did the best of the old and the new. It was all the modern amenities, but it still had a lot of the touches of Maple Leaf Gardens, one of the great old buildings. So they kind of did a nice mix of those two things. And that's what I like, those type of things, much like Camden Yards was the first baseball stadium to kind of mix the best of the old and the new. So I would give Toronto the nod just for the arena, but city-wise, Vancouver is my favorite city in North America. Vancouver, British Columbia out in Western Canada, no matter what you like, it has it. It has mountains, it has water, it has parks, it has skyscrapers. It's got everything. So city-wise, it's Vancouver for me. Arena-wise, I would say Toronto, but also the new arena in Detroit might be at the top of my list too. That brand new arena, Little Caesars Arena, where the Red Wings play now. They really did a nice job of building their new building and incorporating some unique elements on the concourse where you've got a glass roof and glass walls, and you almost feel like you're in a street fair. You don't even think you're inside, but they did a nice job with their new arena as well. So I would single those out as kind of my favorite arenas and my favorite city. And just atmosphere-wise, probably Bell Center in Montreal. There's just something about having 23,000 people in there. They're singing, they're stomping, they're cheering. They do an amazing job with their game night presentation, so I'll throw Bell Center in there too.
I was going to ask, what do you think of San Jose? Is it up there?
Yeah, absolutely. You know what? The Shark Tank reminds me of the Coliseum because of the low ceiling. So the Shark Tank and the Coliseum to me are probably the two loudest arenas. So I do really love going to San Jose just because of that low ceiling and the way the sound bounces off the walls. And we're actually up very high in that building, above the rafters actually. So it's a little strange spot for us. They used to have us in a much better location. We used to be in the first row of the upper deck, and kind of almost overhanging the ice with no obstructions at all. But then they decided to sell those seats and moved us way up in the rafters. But I just still love the atmosphere. Yes, that was what it's all about. They realized what they could get for those seats. But I do love the tank. I do love the Shark Tank, and their whole game presentation is terrific too.
So I guess last question, who is your 2020 Stanley Cup champion?
You know what, Zevan? That is just so out there because who's a favorite after 4.5 months off, right? I mean, do you still say the Boston Bruins? I think I would still give them the nod because they were the best team clearly in the regular season. They were the only team that hit 100 points in the abbreviated season, and I just think they're so complete. They give the Islanders fits every time they've played in the last 3 years. They just have a great 1 through 4. Line-wise up front, 3 great pairs. They got a terrific goaltender in Tuukka Rask. So if I had to say anything, I'd say the Bruins. But, you look at a year ago, the top 4 division winners all got knocked out in the opening round. So that tournament was wide open after round 1. And the St. Louis Blues had an incredible run to win their first cup. This year with 4.5 months off, can the Bruins, pick up where they left off? That's not going to be easy. So I would just say there's not a favorite right now. I still give the Bruins the nod just because of their depth. But I would not be surprised if any one of those 24 teams that are going to start, the big tournament on Saturday afternoon wins the Stanley Cup, and that's what's going to make it so much fun. There is no one prohibitive favorite that everybody is going to say that's the team to beat. It just can't be after 4.5 months off.
Nice. Now, is there anything, before we go, is there anything that you want to plug? Anything, people can find you, like an Instagram or something, right? You want to plug?
I'll just plug our broadcast. Just listen to our broadcast. I think, we have so much fun doing it. And that's something I stress to young broadcasters too. The broadcast has to be fun on your side of the broadcast for it to be fun on the other. So check us out on NHL.com. Obviously, we've got a lot of stations local here in New York. We're on WRHU, our flagship. ESPN Radio is our New York City affiliate. WRCN is our East End affiliate. Sirius XM, we're on that as well. So we have a pretty good reach. But, give our broadcast a try. If you haven't tuned in, I think you'll be impressed by especially the work of the Hofstra students. And, there's nothing better than Stanley Cup hockey. So thanks for letting me get the word out there, guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Thank you for coming on. We really appreciate your generosity and your time. And best of luck. Have a great many calls, we'll say, for many rounds of the playoffs. Many calls.
Thanks so much, guys. Great talking hockey with you.
Awesome. You too, Chris. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Take care.